Alright, this is Jeep Update 60, and this is part 3 of the painless wiring installation. So we're going to pick up where we left off in the last one, and then when I finish all this wiring, I'm going to put all these videos together and make one, it'll be pretty long, but one video that has the entire wiring of the Jeep all in one place, because they're kind of, the parts of these are scattered on my YouTube channel. But anyways, let's pick up where we left off. Just went through the ignition wiring. Got that done. And now the next step is to plug that in, which I already did, and then the brake switch light, or the brake switch. I'm very happy about this. I essentially had to lower and take off all of the steering column mounting hardware to get to this brake light switch. Alright, so there is the brake light switch, and it is up underneath your pedal bracket. While I had my pedals out, I replaced my switch, and I should have thought to do the wiring before I mounted my steering column, but I ended up having to take it all apart, and there it is. It's a simple connection. So anyways, I got it done. Now I got to put all this back together, and I also got this piece here mounted. That was fairly easy. And then again, the ignition switch, I did that wiring outside of the Jeep, and that's the connection there to the I did it steering column. So that's plugged in. Here's all my solders that I did, where I soldered all the wires together. I've got this, which is all your turn signals, and then up under there I've got my brake switch. So I'm going to put this thing back together and then continue on with the wiring. Alright, so I got this thing all tightened back up. Even there at the firewall I had to loosen it up, so that was kind of a pain. So if you can remember to do this, hook up that brake light switch before you mount your steering column. It'll save you some time. Alright, next up in the instructions is the neutral safety switch, and the manual Jeeps CJ7s did not have a neutral safety switch, so they've got this thing looped like this, which it needs to stay looped, because my understanding is this is what goes to your starter, this blue wire, and this is labeled neutral safety switch, NSS, and you don't have to do anything with that one. So that just stays there. I'll probably, I'll end up zip tying it and cleaning it up, but you don't have to do anything with that wire. Alright, same thing with the reverse switch. The reverse switch is for the automatics with a column shifter, and you're going to have a switch that looks like that, and that's going to be your reverse and your neutral safety switch, but I don't have that one either. So this is an open switch with open connectors, so I'm probably going to put some tape over that, some electrical tape, and just make sure that doesn't short against anything when there's power to it. Alright, so that's what that reverse light looks like. Just wrapped it up, covered up those connections, and that's that. Alright, next up is the dimmer switch. So the dimmer switch that's included in the kit looks like this, and it does require you to remove your dimmer switch, which sucks because it took me forever to get that on with the little pedal on it. And then it looks like it will bolt in, plug in, and then bolt in, so this whole piece here will bolt down into the floor, so that's a pretty good secure connection there. Alright, there's the dimmer switch all hooked up and screwed back into the floor. You can kind of see how that harness cradles that dimmer switch, and it actually snaps into place. Real good connection. I like it. Alright, the next two are parking brake switch and dome light, neither of which I have, so I am just going to electrical tape those two connections off. Alright, I got those done and I tucked them up under there, and now the next piece is the tail harness, and that's a pretty good size connector, but it says, hey, we're not doing that right now, so I'm going to skip it and try to follow the instructions. Alright, the next series of wires that you come to is your headlight switch, and backing up a page, your ground. And they suggest doing your ground right there on the steering column support, and that's going to translate into this piece right here. And so I guess drill a hole through there and mount this ground wire, kind of something like that. And obviously you don't have to use where they suggested, and these are freshly painted parts, so I'd have to scrape this off to get a good ground, but it's a pretty good location for it, and I don't see any other areas other than this little metal lip right here to put some ground. So I kind of like that location, so I'll probably use it and drill a hole. Alright, so as per the instructions, I put the ground right where they said. I scraped off some of the black paint and just used a self-tapper after I drilled a little hole. And went in there pretty solid, feels pretty good. Alright, so these are the wires that I've done so far, and after I taped off the ones I wasn't going to use, I kind of zip tied them to death. But I got them up so nothing's hanging down. The one you see hanging down there, that's for the rear tail harness, this big one. And then these are for the headlight switch. And again, there's the ground and the place that they recommend to put it. So the next step in the process is to hook this headlight switch up. And I'm going to do that a little bit different because I don't have my dash on. So all I'm going to do right now is just put the switch in there, and I got all new switches to put in there. So I'm just going to mount the switch, and then later on when I put my dash on, I'll just have to hook up this black and orange wire that goes to the little dash indicator light, and then push this through and put the bezel on. Alright, there's the new headlight switch hooked up. And like I said, just got to push this in the dash, screw on the bezel, and then mount these to the dash indicator light that's right next to the headlight switch. Alright, next up is the clock. And I don't have a clock. I've already taped it off and got it zip tied up there. So that's done. Alright, so next up is the wiper switch, and this one's kind of a unusual installation, but you got to find that pigtail in the kit and manually wire this thing in for the 83 to 86, which is what I have. And when I say manually wire it in, you just have to connect all the wires individually. It just doesn't have a cap on it. So this is that pigtail, and this is the wiper motor wires that go to my windshield wiper, and then here's this pigtail that you got to work through and follow the instructions on where these things go. So on the next page of the wiring harness, or the wiring instructions, they do give you a diagram, and it kind of is labeled and tells you where these wires go, but you do have to manually wire it up. Alright, so when you're done, it looks something like this, and this mirrors the diagram, and it is kind of a manual. You've got the red and white jumper. You can see that thing kind of curve around. That goes to 2 spots, and then every other connection goes along with where it goes in the diagram. And then you've got your 2 main wires going out here, and these are labeled, I don't know if you can see that, but these are labeled wiper switch. There it goes. And that's how you find those wires. So there's the switch wired up, and again, the painless wiring instructions give you a pretty good diagram to follow, and it's actually not that bad. So alright, that's done. And again, easier to do, in my opinion, without the dash on for now. So the next thing in the instructions is the blower switch, and there's a bunch of wires, brown wires, and it comes out with the factory harness, goes into a factory blower motor switch or heater switch, and it can only plug in one way. Pretty simple. And again, not to say this again, but much easier to do without the dash installed for now. Alright, next up is all of my dash label lights, and that's going to be like a black and red wire, and they kind of go in order, and or black and orange wire, and that's what they look like. They light up those little dash lights. And those are pretty easy to do, and they go in order, and there's a clump of wires there. And then I've got to do the ones here for my headlight switch, and then there's two that come with the heater blower motor. But I'm not going to do those yet because I don't have my dash on, and the reason I didn't put my dash on is because the next section is on gauges. And I've got aftermarket gauges, so I'm going to have to do some custom wiring with this clump of wires over here to get them to mount, or to get them to wire up to my new gauges. So that's the next project. All right, I know I said I was going to get into the wiring of the gauges, but I'm going to come back to that. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is run this rear wiring, and I've really already run it. This is the rear connection. Plug and play there, pretty simple. And then you route the wires down here. You can kind of see them there. I'm not done with it yet. Up over here. And then into the back, into the hole that's there. So there's already a hole there from the factory, so that makes that pretty easy. Alright, so this is the rear of the Jeep. You got your gas tank there. And you've only really got 3 connections to wire up back here. So you have your, they give you a lot of extra stuff in case you have side marker lights, but you have your headlight connections, which are plug and play. So right up here coming off your gas tank, you've got your fuel sending unit, or sending unit wire. And then on the other side of the Jeep, you've got your other tail lights. And there's a ground for each tail light wire. Alright, so one of the tricky parts of the rear wiring is getting the wiring over the gas tank without dropping the gas tank and fishing that through. So what I did, and you can see here that I've got like a piece of aluminum fuel line right there, and right through there there's a path. And so I use this black electrical tape, and I taped the end of the wires to it, and then I just kind of fished it through like this. And then as I got it through, you can pull it through on the other side, or you can just untape it and then pull this back out. But I don't think you can see the little path, but if you have one of these Jeeps, you know where I'm talking about. It's right above the gas tank. There's just a little path through there, and that'll take the that'll accept the wiring. And I guess the other way to do it is you could drop your gas tank, but if you've ever done that before with your Jeep, you don't want to do it more than once. It's kind of a pain. So I would try to fish it through the best way you can. Alright, so in the main wiring harness that goes into your engine, it kind of forks into 2 branches, if you will. This one, this is your windshield washer pump, which I don't have, and my horn, which I do have right there. So I'll hook that up, and then the rest of this really just plugs into your headlights, parking lights, and your side marker lights. And so all you really have to do is undo this piece right here, feed it through that hole, hook it up there, and then run it across to this headlight, parking light, side marker light, which is on the fender that's not mounted. So because of that, and really this is just running wires, and also there is a ground wire per headlight, and I will hook those up because I didn't hook them up previously and my headlights wouldn't work. So important to have that ground, but I'm not going to film the routing of these wires. I'm just going to go ahead and run them because it's pretty easy, and all these connections here to your headlights are all plug and play. So it's fairly simple to do that part of the wiring. Alright, so one of the things that I did with the engine section, and I've already done all of these wires, these are just the headlight wires that go in. One of the things that I did with this section is kind of separate out all the wires, and it really kind of actually puts it in perspective. So like this group of wires here goes down, I got them hanging down to hook up to the transmission for my reverse switch, the 4-wheel drive, neutral safety switch, which I don't have. These 2 wires go to my ignition, and I'm going to hook them up to that connector right there, so that's pretty simple. So this section here, labeled engine section, are just 4 wires that come out. One is your electric choke, and then the other ones hook up to your AC sensor, your coolant, and your oil. But since I've got aftermarket gauges, those came with their own wiring that makes that part of the installation plug and play, so I won't even use those wires. And there's my coolant and my electric fan. The oil port is down here by the hydraulic clutch. So coming around down this side here, you've got 2 wires of power and a ground for your heater, which goes right under there. These 2 wires come out for your alternator, and that's the alternator pigtail that I bought. And then you also have this real heavy gauge, 6 gauge I think it is, wire that hooks from the back of your alternator there directly to your battery. So after that, the only other wires that are left are the starter wires and the ground for the engine. And obviously you got to hook all these things up, but when I don't know, when I've separated them all out and everything, it's just a lot more manageable. So that's where I am on the engine wiring. I think I understand everything, and I think I'm going to be able to do this fairly quickly. Routing the wires will be kind of a pain because I want it to look really clean. And let's not forget these wires here that go to the electric fan. So a lot of wiring to do, even though it's when you separate them out, it's a little bit more manageable. It's still a lot to do. All right, so in the Jeep, I've got the dash laying across the seats. I've got my gauges installed, and I've started to kind of try to understand how to wire up the gauges. So I'll get into this in the next video and finish up these gauges and finish up the engine section. All right, so overall I'm pretty pleased with my progress here. The wiring is, as I mentioned earlier, it's pretty tedious and it's very time consuming. So it's taken me a long time to get through it, but I can kind of see a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not very close to it yet, but it's there. So essentially all I have left to do is the engine, the electric fan, and then wiring up those gauges. So that's what the next video will be about. And when I get that done, probably the next video after that one, we'll be firing this thing up. Stay tuned to the channel, more cool videos to come. And if you like this video, like the content of the channel, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.